Hello guys, today I'm excited to announce a new series called the Beginner Series. Basically what I'm going to be doing, this is aimed at maybe players who have just started the game, they've learned the rules, maybe they've played a couple games, and for part 1 today I'm going to be taking you through some of the basic strategies you'll pick up and you'll learn over time, just basically to make sure your gameplay is fairly sound. Nothing too complicated here, not going to go into any in detail cards this time, but we will in future episodes. So let's get into it today. First of all, some pretty logical rules and basic parts of the game. So attacking with creatures with immune to retaliation first when we're killing off a creature. So as hopefully you'll know, if you kill off a creature, normally you will not take any retaliation damage if you deal that final blow. However, if you attack it beforehand and you don't have immune to retaliation, you will be receiving whatever retaliation damage that opponent's creatures have. So if we have a creature with immune to retaliation and one without, we're going to normally attack with the one without immune to retaliation. And this is basically just to avoid taking free damage on our creatures, which we never want to do. So in this example here, we have the Goblin Scout, immune to retaliation 1-drop, and then we also have the Renar Harpy 2/1/4, but with no card text, meaning it is absolutely vulnerable to retaliation. Now, let's go through the scenarios to break it down quickly. The Goblin Scout attacks first, goes down to 2 health, and then we attack with the Harpy. Because the Harpy is killing off the other Harpy, it's going to take no retaliation damage. However, if we make the mistake of attacking with the Harpy first, because the attack will not kill off the Harpy, we will take 1 damage to our own, and it will be left with 3 health. If we attack with the Goblin Scout, our Harpy will stay at a perfectly fine 4 health. So something basic, you'll definitely get used to it as you learn the game, so just keep that in mind. On to the next slide. Leveling up requirements to give you more options for the next turns. Now, one of the things which I see a lot of new players struggle with the game is understanding the requirement system. Now, there's not a lot of other card games that are really similar at all, so it does take a bit of getting used to. Now, when we're leveling up requirements, we really want to plan out what we can do in terms of head. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight, I have a Black Skull Shredder here with a 4 might requirement, and I have Insect Swarm with a 3 magic requirement. So as we can see here, I have stats of 3, 1, 2, and so I really want to explain this concept to you guys. No matter what next turn, I can always increase my might to 4, because even if I don't do it this turn, next turn I will have that ability to increase it to 4. However, if I choose to increase might or fortune on this turn, no matter what I do, I will not be able to increase my magic enough to meet the 3 magic requirement of Insect Swarm. So this scenario comes quite up a lot when I'm playing some of my decks, and here I will always choose to increase my magic to 2. Now this basically allows me to play any card in my hand next turn depending on the situation that's thrown at me. So if I want to play the Shredder still, I can increase my might, I'm at 4 might, and there's no worries. If I decide I want to Insect Swarm, then I can also do that because I can increase my magic again up to 3. I also have a Campfire in hand with 3 fortune requirement, which I'll also be able to increase next turn if I wish to. Now obviously there's not always going to be situations where you can increase to every card in your hand, but if you have the option where basically you can take more options next turn, you obviously want to leave those options available to you. So just keep it in mind. Once you get to know the feel of your deck, you'll know when you need to start increasing other requirements, and when you need to make a choice between going for a high requirement spell or a high requirement creature. So on to the next one, positioning of flyer and melee shooters. So melee and flyer shooters can go anywhere, either in the front row or the back row. This can be quite difficult for newer players. So firstly, melee shooters, they work just the same as melee and shooters and flyers, in that they can go in the front or the back row, but melee shooters can also attack the back row from either position. So this is also quite important to remember. So with flyers, when deciding if we want to position in the front row or the back row, we need to look at the rest of our hand and our opponent's likely responses. Now, the advantage of putting it in the back row is that we can play a melee in front of it and protect our flyer creature from being attacked by other melees or flyers. Now, the advantage of putting it in the front row is that should our opponent play another creature, we have the option of playing a shooter or flyer behind it to give it additional support. So that's the two things you can want to consider. Oftentimes, you'll see players putting in the back row to start with, and this is normally just to have a bit more versatility in allowing you to defend it more easily. But of course, as with everything in the game, there's always situations where you'll want to do something else. Now, melee shooters are a bit easier, as they can attack the back row regardless of where they go. So once again, we're likely to put in the back row to give us the option to defend it, but we also have the option to put in the melee row and still be able to attack that back row should we have a shooter we want to protect. Now, in deciding whether you want to block a creature, you need, with a flyer or a melee shooter, you need to consider how your opponent can defend it. Now, if your opponent has a melee creature, there's basically no way to defend a melee creature because you can't put anything in front of it. However, if there's a creature on the back row, like the Goblin Scout, it can be defended from flyer and melee creatures with a creature put in front of it, stopping it from attacking. However, with the melee shooters, they can still go over the top and hit it in the back row. So, for example, if I just had a normal flyer creature here, I would be quite hesitant to put it in that bottom row with the Goblin Scout, as it can easily be defended, which will force me to move my Harpy. However, the Storm Mage Hunter is basically impossible to be guarded from, and so we can put it in the bottom row, knowing that our opponent will have to respond to the threat and won't simply be able to block it off. So obviously, guys, it is a complicated subject. You will pick it up as you develop your game skills. So hopefully I can give you a bit of an introduction here. So just remember to consider how you can defend it, how you can support it, and if your opponent can defend his other creatures. So on to part 4. This is an inherent part of all card games, principle of card advantage. Now, what I mean by card advantage is that we're growing the size and the value of our hand relative to the hand of our opponent. But we cannot dismiss the value of the cards on the field. You can have 10 cards in hand, but if my opponent has 8 creatures on the board, then we have to count those as cards in his hand, as they are still doing their intended job. However, it's not easily measurable, and in Duel of Champions, it is a little bit less prevalent. So there are a couple of ways that we can generate card advantage for ourselves. And in the long run, a deck with card advantage will win against one that is having a low number of cards in hand. It will be able to deploy less threats and have less responses to our own threats. So the way we can generate this card advantage is through powerful spells and fortunes. For example, so the way a spell will do it, such as Ice Meteor, which will deal 6 damage to target creature and all adjacent creatures. Basically, the goal of the spell will be to kill multiple creatures, and in doing this, we are killing off. Let's say we kill off 2 creatures. We are killing off 2 creatures. That's 2 cards with only 1 card. So that in the long run, that's going to generate us card advantage. Now there are a couple of other ways in Duel of Fortunes to generate card advantage. So big creatures. Big creatures will often be able to kill off multiple smaller creatures, which also count as a card each. So in the long run, we're gaining card advantage through them as well. We can also do it through draw engines and cards. So we have Titan Workforce, which is whenever a friendly construct creature dies, return it to its owner's hand. Now basically what this does is every time your construct creature dies, it's going to go back to your hand. So basically, instead of going to the graveyard, you're drawing that card again. So you're going to end up with a constantly growing hand, and you can't really lose your creatures. So that's going to, in the long run, create a huge card advantage for you. However, as with every other thing, with just strictly drawing cards, you can be punished by not affecting the board. So that's something to keep in mind. Next, we have the most straightforward example, the Golden Horseshoe, which is basically a 3 resource card, and it's going to draw 3 cards for you. Simple, you're paying 1 card to gain 3 more cards. Strict card advantage right there. Okay, but in Duel of Champions, we cannot focus solely on card advantage, as we need to consider tempo. Now tempo, the best way I could describe it is taking the initiative, developing our board, and forcing our opponent to react. This means we're playing more creatures, or we're playing bigger creatures early on than our opponent, and hopefully getting more threats out onto the board. Okay, so it's simple to think of it this way. If I have 7 resources worth of cards on the field, and my opponent only has 3 resources worth of cards on the field, then I have the tempo. I have more threats out on the board, and he is responding to me. Now, one of the key principles of tempo is that we're sacrificing card advantage often to gain tempo. So what I mean by this is we're using cards that strictly won't gain us card advantage, but we will gain a resource edge, as in we've spent more of our resources on the board, so we're hoping to continue this tempo in order to win. So a couple of basic examples for you guys are Broken Bridge and Town Port, which both do similar thing, returning our opponent's creatures to their hand. And what this does is it gains us a resource and tempo advantage. So let's say my opponent spent 6 resources to play a big creature. If I use Town Portal to return it to its hand, and I have spent 3 resources to my opponent's 6 resources, and he's going to have to spend those resources again to play the creature. So that's gaining us a huge resource and tempo advantage. So we're going to gain an immediate state of the board, and in sacrifice the long run card disadvantage that will come from a Town Portal. So basically we're playing the Town Portal, we're not strictly gaining a card, so we're 0 for 1ing ourselves, but in order to gain an immediate board advantage and tempo is huge in Duel Champions. Now, one of the reasons tempo has a higher importance in Duel Champions over card advantage than other card games you may have played is that our hero ability will allow us to constantly draw a card for only 1 resource once we have met our requirements that we need to first. So on to the next one, the importance of drawing cards first. Now, I bring this one up a lot. I still see top players doing it all the time. It's an extremely easy mistake to make. You have to play disciplined, but I can assure you that it is the best thing to do and will win you games occasionally every now and then. Now, what I mean by this is we see our turn and we want to plan our turn out and figure out if we are going to draw a card, we should draw a card first. Now, the reason we do this is we don't know what we're going to draw, and the card we draw could have a significant impact on the way we play. You don't want to play defensively and then draw a card at the end of the turn and realize you drew the perfect card to win the game, because that's going to lose games every now and then. You should just get into a good habit, get in early, get used to it. So it's an easy mistake to make. So what I mean by this is, let's have a look at our hand. We have 13 resources, and let's say we want to play everything in our hand, but put as many threats as we can. So the total cost of our cards will be 3, 5, 9, and 12, which will leave us with a perfect number of resources to draw a card. Now we could play our cards out first, and then draw a card. Or we could draw first and see if the card we draw will change the way we will play the turn. Now this could have a huge impact. It could be a big threat, it could be the perfect answer you need, it could be anything. So just a general principle you're going to want to learn, and this will also kind of tie into my next point of spending your resources efficiently. This is a great way for tempo, and you need to consider it in that maybe you can play more creatures one way, but then you're going to not be spending your resources very efficiently. So maybe you want to find the perfect combination. Now, of course, we don't want to overcommit, but with time you'll understand when you should be playing to the maximum efficiency and when you need to hold back and watch out for potential area of effect damage. So guys, to the first part of the series. In the future videos I will be going over some basic cards we want to begin to start playing around, some other tips. Now guys, I am doing this video to help the new players learn the game, so if you guys have any questions at all, anything you'd like to me to cover, then do not hesitate to contact me or comment below. I will be glad to oblige and help you guys out. If you're ever having problems learning the game, feel free to add me. If you PM me or something, I can send you my in-game name if you don't already have it. If you feel free to subscribe if you want to follow the series or my other series called Beating the Meta with Cat. Basically what I'm doing is I'm going through each of the meta decks, explaining it to them, and as you progress as a player it is important to understand the decks you're versing, so you can play around their threats. Also good for this is the site mdoctools.com, which basically got a lot of deck lists from good players and the card library. So I recommend you check that out. So thanks for watching, guys. I look forward to creating part 2 for you guys.